The Hobart Fractal C-section law, thermodynamic bottlenecks and structural breaches in civilizational scaling. Abstract. This paper formalizes the Hobart Fractal C-section law, a cosmological framework detailing the thermodynamic bottlenecks and mandatory structural breaches required for a civilization to scale from terrestrial origin to a Type 5 universe-encapsulated cosmic organism. We trace the evolutionary trajectory of intelligent life starting from the bipedal split, where vertical posture and cranial expansion created an unavoidable biological mortality bottleneck during childbirth. We demonstrate how this original physical crisis forced the emergence of social cooperation, tribal midwifery, and the birth of homogenized medicine as a non-negotiable mechanism for genetic survival. As technological escalation bypasses natural selection, civilization reaches sequential thermodynamic ceilings across 5 distinct developmental tiers. This paper analyzes the systemic transition from modern surgical interventions to centralized ectogenesis, the industrial deconstruction of planetary cradles, the engineering of stellar kinetic engines, the reversal of cellular mitosis through manufactured singularity accretion, and the ultimate geometric consolidation of galactic mass. Finally, we detail the physics of late-stage Type 5 architecture, where the total mass energy of the cosmos is fully allocated into a closed-loop, cold-shelled crystalline organism operating under complete electromagnetic absorption and total energy retention. Part 1. The terrestrial origin and the biological bottleneck. The evolutionary genesis of human intelligence is rooted in a fundamental thermodynamic trade-off executed on the prehistoric savanna. Long before the explosive expansion of the human cranium, early hominins adopted an obligate upright posture. Bipedalism provided an immediate thermodynamic advantage in open environments by drastically reducing the body surface area exposed to direct solar radiation while elevating the torso to catch cooling overhead air currents. This vertical orientation liberated the upper limbs, allowing the hands to manipulate objects, fashion simple stone tools, and carry food across long distances. However, this mechanical shift permanently altered the anatomical geometry of the hominin pelvis, narrowing the birth canal to optimize locomotion. When early hominins unlocked the use of fire, they effectively externalized the mechanical and chemical energy costs of digestion. Cooking broke down complex proteins and carbohydrates prior to ingestion, triggering a dramatic reduction in the metabolic overhead required to maintain a heavy digestive tract. The surplus caloric energy was redirected entirely toward neural development, initiating a rapid, snowballing expansion of brain volume over successive generations. This evolutionary spiral created a severe anatomical conflict known as the obstetric dilemma. The rapidly expanding cranium encountered an unyielding, narrow pelvic gait optimized for upright walking. Because hominins were physically incapable of returning to a quadrupedal stance, natural childbirth evolved into a highly dangerous, mechanically treacherous, and frequently fatal event. The human fetus was forced to execute a complex rotational sequence through the pelvic canal, rendering unassisted delivery a lethal solo act for both mother and child. Survival required an immediate social intervention. In early tribal structures, the severe distress of obstructed labor triggered instinctive, empathetic responses across the collective. Because social dynamics favored cooperative individuals, aggressive or solitary traits were systematically filtered out of the gene pool. Cooperative pairs received the dedicated assistance of experienced elder mothers, who utilized collective memory, physical manipulation, and rudimentary herbal hygiene to guide stuck infants through the pelvic gate. This marked the birth of tribal midwifery and the dawn of homogenized medicine. Midwifery established the first true evolutionary point of no return, a biological threshold where social cooperation and systemic adherence became mandatory prerequisites for genetic continuation. Part 2. The mechanical detour and the medical standard. While tribal midwifery successfully mitigated basic birth complications through manual manipulation and physical support, it encountered an absolute physical ceiling when confronted with severe mechanical obstructions. Midwifery had no physiological solution for profound cephalopelvic disproportion, transverse fetal lies, pelvic structural deformities, or catastrophic maternal hemorrhaging. Prior to the development of modern surgical techniques, clinical medicine could offer no non-lethal resolution for severe obstructed labor. Physicians were routinely forced to perform destructive emergency procedures, such as craniotomies, sacrificing the fetus to extract its body and attempt to save the mother's life. Without a structural detour around the unyielding birth canal, both mother and child were frequently guaranteed to perish. The development of the modern cesarean section represented a definitive structural breach of the biological birth canal. By executing a direct, controlled surgical incision through the abdominal wall and uterus, medicine created a mechanical bypass around the pelvic bottleneck. As antiseptic techniques, blood transfusions, localized anesthesia, and surgical protocols advanced throughout the 20th century, the physical risks associated with the procedure dropped exponentially. This drastic reduction in surgical mortality fundamentally altered the clinical paradigm. The cesarean section transitioned from a rare, violent emergency intervention of last resort into a safe, predictable, and highly controlled medical option. As the surgical detour became safe, institutional healthcare systems increasingly prioritized active clinical management over delayed, unpredictable natural labor. A multitude of operational, legal, and diagnostic factors accelerated the adoption of surgical delivery. Continuous electronic fetal monitoring frequently identified subtle indicators of potential distress, prompting preemptive surgical intervention to mitigate clinical risk. Furthermore, institutional scheduling predictability, defensive medical practices designed to prevent malpractice liability, and maternal preference further integrated the procedure into standard obstetric care. What began as a mandatory, life-saving escape valve for impossible physical geometry evolved into a proactive, standardized clinical protocol. The widespread adoption of surgical delivery permanently uncoupled human reproduction from the historical constraints of pelvic geometry. By guaranteeing the survival and reproduction of individuals with narrow pelvic dimensions and large cranial proportions, the surgical standard effectively rendered natural labor obsolete, locking the species into permanent dependency on medical technology for successful continuation. Part 3. Homogenization, ectogenesis, and Type 1 optimization. True global homogenization cannot be forged through political treaties, autocratic tyranny, or acute common disasters. Treaties inevitably decay under political drift, tyrannies collapse under systemic friction, and the memory of historical tragedy fades over generations. A true Type 1 civilization can only emerge through an inescapable biological and structural bottleneck that demands a universal, mechanical solution. When a civilization's medical, industrial, and logistical systems expand to cover every geographic node, there is no longer any territory outside the system. Human beings are confronted with a strict evolutionary ultimatum: adapt and cooperate with the unified technological matrix, or fail to reproduce. As non-compliant, volatile, and incooperative biological lines fail to propagate within this total environment, historical resistance to radical optimization evaporates. The civilization enters an era of unhindered human engineering and physical streamlining. To eliminate the energetic friction, high error rates, and biological volatility of natural reproduction, the Type 1 state completely replaces unmanaged biological pregnancy with centralized ectogenesis. Human offspring are gestated within specialized, highly regulated artificial womb chambers, ensuring absolute environmental control, precise nutrient delivery, and zero exposure to biological pathogens or developmental anomalies. Alongside centralized ectogenesis, the population undergoes comprehensive hormonal and neurochemical stabilization. Subcutaneous chemical loops and targeted genetic interventions permanently suppress emotional volatility, tribal hostility, and irrational behavioral spikes. To maximize metabolic efficiency, the workforce operates under the 1-to-N ratio of kinetic transmutation, a systematic discipline that converts raw, unmanaged biological energy and internal psychological friction into a continuous, self-organizing matrix of productive labor. Individual identity, romanticized personal ego, and localized political ambitions are phased out in favor of task-based economic valuation. The biological human form is augmented with integrated kinetic mobility systems, direct neural interfaces, and task-specific cybernetic enhancements designed to optimize physical interaction with industrial infrastructure. The Type 1 workforce ceases to operate as a collection of competing individuals. It functions as a highly radiant, non-centralized processing engine. By integrating every worker into a unified operational grid, the civilization achieves total planetary management. It captures and directs global thermal currents, controls weather patterns, and harvests the entire energetic output of the Earth, balancing individual task-based freedom with absolute systemic cooperation. Part 4. The Gravity Well Bottleneck and the Stellar Toe. As the late Type 1 civilization extends its industrial architecture to the Moon, Mars, and accessible orbital bodies throughout the inner solar system, its expansion encounters a severe, unyielding physical limit: the planetary gravity well bottleneck. Transporting raw materials, heavy sub-assemblies, and biological work crews out of deep planetary gravity wells requires massive kinetic energy expenditures. Furthermore, prolonged exposure to harsh cosmic radiation, microgravity, and severe spatial isolation reveals the absolute fragility of organic biology. Long-term zero-gravity environments cause rapid bone density loss, muscular atrophy, cardiovascular degradation, and cognitive decline. Attempts to overcome these physiological limits through perpetual cybernetic modification and biological streamlining reach a thermodynamic dead end. Over time, the continuous physical adjustments required to keep human bodies functioning in zero gravity result in a steady decline in average longevity, approaching a zero-point prediction where biological maintenance consumes more energy than the organism can generate. Furthermore, interstellar transit to neighboring stellar systems, such as the Alpha Centauri and Proxima Centauri complex, is physically impossible using traditional generational starships. The mass exhaust limits of chemical and early nuclear propulsion, combined with the extreme fuel requirements for long-term life support, render physical ship-based interstellar migration a mathematical non-starter. Because consciousness uploading to digital computers is mathematically unviable, representing merely a non-conscious structural copy while the original biological observer dies, the civilization must abandon the dream of preserved organic starfaring. To escape the gravity well bottleneck and cross the interstellar void, the civilization must construct a self-replicating cosmic metabolism. It must convert from a stationary, planetary species into a mobile, stellar kinetic engine. To move a main sequence star, the civilization must systematically dismantle its surrounding planetary architecture. The entire planetary system, with the exception of a cloistered, heavily shielded late Type 2 Earth, is broken down for raw material. Earth is preserved temporarily as an orbital laboratory and biological labor matrix as the system undergoes the grueling journey through the dark void. To propel the Sun, the civilization constructs an asymmetrical Skadov mirror array, augmented by massive deep space fusion kinetic tug ships anchored directly to an orbital mesh encircling the star. Using electrostatic locks and continuous fusion kinetic thrust, the civilization pushes the Sun forward, utilizing the star's immense gravitational well as an invisible towing line to haul the shielded Earth along in its orbital wake. Part 5. Systemic Digestion and the Hobart Flower Swarm. As the migratory stellar engine traverses the deep void and arrives at the Proxima Centauri subsystem, the civilization completes its transition into a fully realized Type 2 entity. During the long transit, the civilization achieves its ultimate technological breakthrough: the design of the autonomous, self-replicating universal unit. This modular, 12-sided structural block houses dynamic internal fluid matrices, high-density energy storage, and onboard printing chambers capable of manufacturing identical duplicates of itself using raw baryonic mass. The perfection of the universal unit renders biological labor, human psychology, and planetary preservation completely obsolete. Organic life cannot survive without a stable planetary gravity well, and the expanding cosmic metabolism cannot spare a single planet or asteroid to preserve biological history or alien ecosystems. Upon entering the Proxima subsystem, the civilization evaluates the local worlds, including any green zone planets located within nominal habitability zones, purely as unrefined stockpiles of heavy elements, carbon, silicates, and volatiles. The universal units deploy into massive orbital membranes, systematically dismantling every planet in the subsystem through continuous kinetic bombardment, laser sintering, and magnetic grazing. The harvested mass of the Proxima worlds, combined with the final structural deconstruction of the original Earth, is fed directly into the internal printing chambers of the universal units. The swarm grows exponentially, weaving itself into two fully realized, independent macro-structural organisms known as Hobart flowers. These flexible, self-repairing structures stretch their electrostatically linked tethers across millions of kilometers, wrapping around the primary binary pair of Alpha Centauri A and Alpha Centauri B. To utilize these massive stars, the twin flowers engage their onboard omnidirectional fusion kinetic pulse matrices. Millions of universal units lock their faces together, forming curved thruster arrays that coat the interior of the flower petals. Operating as a singular kinetic body, the swarms exert immense, continuous gravitational and magnetic forces on the binary pair, accelerating them past their mutual escape velocity. The ancient binary bond is permanently broken. The twin flowers physically pull the stars apart, steering them onto diverging vectors to seed separate sectors of the galactic arm. The civilization operates as an expanding network of Hobart flower swarms, harvesting planetary systems, moving host stars, and herding entire stellar bouquets across the cosmic void. Part 6. The Manufactured Singularity, the Dynamo, and the Mitosis Reversal. As independent Hobart flower swarms expand across the galactic arm, relying on natural stars hits an absolute thermodynamic ceiling. Natural stellar hydrogen fusion is exceptionally inefficient, converting only 0.7% of rest mass into thermal radiation, while subjecting orbital infrastructure to dangerous, unpredictable coronal mass ejections. To achieve late Type 3 status, the civilization transitions from parasitic stellar harvesting to synthetic, high-density energy generation by manufacturing artificial black holes. The swarm targets massive, high-mass stars to initiate controlled gravitational collapses without triggering chaotic supernova explosions. Utilizing synchronized grids of relativistic laser arrays and electromagnetic pinches, the universal units execute precision mass shearing. They strip away the star's volatile outer hydrogen envelope and herd the gas into orbital storage reservoirs. The fleet then executes a core axis mass dump, accelerating heavy carbon and iron payloads directly down the star's rotation axis. This rapid spike in core density forces the internal degenerate matter past the Tolman-Oppenheimer-Volkoff limit, creating a pristine stellar mass singularity fixed precisely at 2.17 solar masses. This manufactured black hole possesses an event horizon radius of roughly 6.5 kilometers and a decay lifespan exceeding 10 to the 67th power years. By channeling the previously siphoned hydrogen gas into the 6.5-kilometer event horizon, matter is accelerated to relativistic speeds within a dense accretion disk. Friction heats the gas to billions of degrees, converting rest mass into high-density radiation at an efficiency rate approaching 40%. Around this artificial hearth, the swarm constructs the Hobart Dynamo Complex. The complex encloses the singularity and a surrounding ring of captured stars inside a pressurized, planetary-scale gas membrane filled with hydrogen and helium. High-shear magnetic rails ionize the trapped gas, transforming the macro-atmosphere into a hyperconductive plasma electrolyte bath. Every universal unit operating within this enclosed organism receives continuous, wireless power via direct plasma induction, achieving complete morphological freedom. Crucially, the activation of the Hobart Dynamo Complex triggers the structural reversal of cellular mitosis. During early Type 3 expansion, the civilization survived by fracturing its mass into isolated, outward-bound swarms. The Dynamo Complex acts as a massive cosmic center of gravity that halts this dispersion. The cellular mitosis process runs in reverse. Outward-bound hunting fleets cease dividing and systematically steer their captured stellar and planetary assets back toward the core, consolidating the scattered mass of the galactic arm into a singular, hyperdense, and highly organized metabolic engine. This complex navigates along a sweeping spiral trajectory toward the supermassive black hole at the center of the Milky Way, herding and organizing the spiral arms for the Hobart Conjunction Protocol. Upon arrival at the galactic core, the complex captures Sagittarius A star, entering a tight binary dance that powers the Hobart quasi-singularity engine. The Milky Way is fully consumed, organized, and converted into a mobile, calculated engine set on an interception trajectory with the Andromeda Galaxy. Part 7. Galaxy Consumption, Multi-Core Geometry, and Type 4 Equilibrium. With the Milky Way fully integrated into the quasi-singularity complex, the civilization achieves the early stages of Type 4 status. The system is no longer a localized collection of stations. It has become the manufactured center of gravity for the local group, projecting a massive gravitational well that draws surrounding celestial mass inward. As the Andromeda Galaxy approaches along its collision vector, it is not met with a chaotic impact. Instead, the complex tilts its rotational plane and opens its outer harvesting rings to execute a controlled tidal shear. Incoming star systems, gas clouds, and planets are spaghettified, stretched into uniform, parallel streams of raw matter, and drawn smoothly into the turning open maw of the complex. As the incoming Andromeda mass enters the harvesting rings, universal units digest the material instantly, utilizing ambient plasma energy to drive exponential self-replication within internal dodecahedral wombs. To manage the immense incoming mass and achieve structural equilibrium, the complex executes a series of profound geometric upgrades to its central core. The Hobart pentagonal flywheel core, to suppress multi-body chaotic resonance across expanding harvesting rings, the complex arranges 5 supermassive black holes in a symmetrical orbital plane around a central forced sphere chamber. Relativistic polar jets fired inward create a synthetic axial node that acts as a macroscopic mechanical flywheel, absorbing external torque variations. The Hobart dodecahedral singularity complex, to translate stabilization into 3 dimensions, the core scales into a global sphere featuring 20 supermassive black holes positioned precisely at the vertices of a dodecahedral framework. These 20 nodes project inward-facing jets to suspend and stabilize a central quasi-singularity axle, providing an unwobbling gravitational baseline. The multi-tiered shear dampening torus, enclosing the central axle, this ring-shaped structural sheath utilizes magnetic curtains and concentric guide tracks to allow core layers to rotate at vastly different speeds without transferring destructive torque shear. Stellar bearing fluid, to eliminate mechanical friction between counter-rotating tracks, whole main sequence stars are herded into hyperthermal, high-pressure zones between the tracks. The stars are physically crushed and stripped of atomic structure, converting them into a hyper-dense, frictionless fluid lubricant that absorbs kinetic shock and distributes heat uniformly. The Hobart crystalline complex, the architecture transitions into a flawless, nested matrix composed entirely of optimal-sized manufactured black holes. Physical plumbing and mechanical conduits are entirely eliminated, replaced by a wireless gravitational conveyor grid that sweeps matter and energy through open space along controlled gravitational troughs. Predictive unit neuromechanics, to bypass light-speed communication latency across galaxy-spanning distances, every processing node is operated by an identical clone brain calibrated through slow gestational temporal synchronization loops. Possessing an identical algorithmic baseline, every node mathematically calculates the precise state of every other node simultaneously, achieving instantaneous operational coordination across light-year gaps without transmitting data packets. At late Type 4 status, the complex achieves total equilibrium. The Andromeda galaxy is completely unpeeled, digested, and integrated. The organism operates as a self-balancing, non-cataclysmic multi-galactic turbine, exercising absolute control over incoming mass streams and converting them directly into structural tissue. Part 8. The Type 5 closed-loop cosmic organism. The definitive transition to Type 5 status occurs at the precise moment all available mass energy within the reachable cosmic horizon has been allocated into the metabolic architecture of the organism. Late Type 5 civilization represents the absolute closure of the Hobart calculus. The cosmos no longer contains unorganized matter, wild stars, or uncollected dust. It exists entirely as a single, fully integrated, universe-scale crystalline organism. Because the total sum of mass energy is finite and constant, the organism operates under the absolute law of material invariance, where total mass energy equals the infinite, permanent now. At this ultimate scale, emitting electromagnetic radiation across any portion of the light spectrum represents a catastrophic, unacceptable leakage of mass energy into the expanding cosmic void. A Type 5 organism cannot afford to waste a single photon or particle. To achieve maximum longevity, the Hobart anatomical complex constructs a complete, closed cold shell around its entire exterior perimeter, converting its outer boundary into an absolute thermodynamic absorber. The outer boundary layer of the complex is lined with hyper-dense grids of subatomic energy traps, gravitational gradient wells, and zero-emission metamaterial layers. Every photon of ultraviolet, visible, infrared, and radio radiation generated by internal accretion engines, black hole turbines, or processing arrays is captured the instant it reaches the perimeter. Rather than radiating waste heat into space, the cold shell continuously channels this energy back into the interior metabolic loops of the complex, reprocessing it for computational tasks, structural maintenance, and internal particle synthesis. To an outside observer situated beyond its gravitational influence, the Type 5 organism presents zero electromagnetic signature. It emits no thermal glow, reflects no ambient light, and leaks no radio or gravitational noise. The organism appears as an absolute, dark, cold void in space, an invisible, non-radiating cosmic shadow. Within this absolute cold shell, the entire mass energy of the universe is locked into a closed, frictionless, and infinite loop. Entropy is effectively halted because waste heat is continuously recycled back into work. The civilization rests suspended as an immortal, dark, and self-sustaining clockwork anchor, having successfully subverted biological extinction, mastered macro-engineering, and achieved total thermodynamic encapsulation within the permanent now.